Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Jukebox Junkies, a podcast where we tackle music industry topics, trends, and pop culture moments. On today's episode, Chelsea and I will be breaking down the two most critically acclaimed pop albums of 2020, Dua Lipa's Future Nostalgia and Taylor Swift's Folklore. How are you today, Chelsea?
Oh, I'm great, Dylan. How are you?
I am very good. I am so excited to talk about these two albums.
Me too. I actually made way more notes than I thought I was going to.
I started writing notes and then I kind of realized that I didn't really even know what to write because with Folklore, it's such a deep album. There's so much you can get into. And it's what I love about both Folklore and Future Nostalgia. They're like complete opposites from each other.
They really are.
Yeah, so I ended up just kind of writing down, like, I looked up different like year-end charts from like Billboard and Rolling Stone and stuff like that, and kind of made notes about that kind of stuff and comparing them. So right off the bat, what is your favorite song off of both albums?
I feel like it's going to be pretty cliche. And I've said before that the one is my favorite off of Folklore, but honestly, I think I have to take that back and say that This Is Me Trying is my favorite.
Interesting.
Um, but then, gosh, choosing a favorite for Future Nostalgia is like, but I would have to say Hallucinate.
Hallucinate. Okay. So I did like a best and a runner up for both of them because I couldn't just pick one from either one. So my favorite from Folklore is The Last Great American Dynasty.
That song, I have so much to talk about.
Oh,
Yes.
me too. Me too. And then my runner up is Betty. Betty is such
Oh,
a great song.
hmm.
And then that.
No. I'm just thinking about all the things I wrote down about those songs. Like, those are
uh,
two very good choices.
I thought that was a I don't like that one. And,
No.
okay, I was gonna say I will fight you. and and then for Future Nostalgia, I have Levitating as my favorite, and the song Future Nostalgia as my runner up.
Future Nostalgia itself is just so perfect.
It's so, I remember the first time I heard it, and I guess that's the track one on Future Nostalgia, so we can just kind of start getting into that one if you would like.
Yeah, that's cool.
I remember the first time I heard it, I did not know what to think because, and I don't know if I've really got into this before with you on our podcast. I used to hate Dua Lipa. I
What?
I know, and now I think back on that, I'm like, what the hell was wrong with me? But
Why?
I don't know, like New Rules, I still just
Dude.
I don't like that song. There's just something.
You should listen to Alice in Wonderland's remix of it. That's what actually got me into Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like I remember saying, so I was going to broadcasting school when Dua Lipa was new and she was coming out to like New Rules and like I Don't Give a Fuck and all those songs were really popular.
Yes.
And I just remember saying to my program director Terry Avery, I was just like, you know what Dua Lipa sounds like to me? She sounds like what Pink would be doing right now if she was new but bored. I was like, Dua Lipa sounds like a bored
Oh,
Pink.
what? See, my problem was I loved her. I knew immediately that she had potential, but I didn't know if she was gonna be like Daya and just have that one album and not really have the staying power to
Right.
be the name that she is right now. I mean, you know that she was kicked out of like the music high school thing she went to in London, right? They said her
Dua Lipa
vocals,
was?
yes, they said her vocals were not good enough. You weren't up to par. Bye bye, honey. And now look at her.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, like your
Multi-platinum
opinion,
recording artist.
right, your opinion was kind of shared. They told her she didn't stand out enough and like really basically a lot of things you said and here she is.
Yeah. And I guess I just really didn't get her whole thing. I just thought it just did not work for me.
Oh, but she was
So
so pop just immediately.
I
Just pop
know.
star.
And I still will go back to like New Rules I don't like and One Kiss with Calvin Harris I don't like.
Oh, One Kiss is one of my favorite Calvin Harris songs of all time. Like,
See, so I just had such a love-hate relationship with her. And then so I think Future Nostalgia, the song, was the first one she released maybe it was Don't Start Now. It was one of those two.
No, I feel like it was actually, like,
Physical, maybe?
physical, yeah, like, I feel like it wasn't the strongest lead single.
Yeah, I don't remember which
Don't
one. I
Start Now definitely dropped 2nd. It wasn't
Okay.
1st.
Yeah, I say I know it was one of those 3, like, they all came out pretty closely together before the
Yeah.
album was released. But going into the song Future Nostalgia, and it was kinda like her rapping, I was like, "What is this?"
Right, she let her accent come out a wee bit, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So fun and sassy, mate. I love it.
Yeah, and so I was so just like I listened to it and I was like, "What the hell was that?" I was so intrigued, and then I just listened to it more and more and more, just trying to figure it out. I'm like, "Do I like this? Do I actually like a Dua Lipa song a lot?" And then that
Yes,
was kind
yes,
of
you
my
do.
thought, yeah, because then that was kind of just my mindset for the rest of the year. Just like, "Oh, I really like this. Wow, I really like this. Hold on, this is Dua Lipa. I'm not supposed to like Dua Lipa." So it was just yeah.
Well, Apple Music has these little, like, kind of intros that they do, and she went through each song on hers. Taylor's wasn't that in depth, but she said that song was all about fun and sassiness for her, and that it was supposed to kind of set the tone, and she wanted to time travel with this album. And if that was her goal, she definitely hit it. It was
Yeah.
fun, it was sassy, it was very, like, synthy and 80s pop, like, I don't know, I love it. The little future at the beginning, you know?
Yeah, I think it was a perfect opener because you want your opening of your album to really set the tone
Yep.
for the whole thing, and I think it really did because every song on this album, except for maybe Boys Will Be Boys,
Boys
is
Will Be Boys and, the one right before it.
good in bed.
Yeah, those 2 to me kind of don't belong. Anyways, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, but like Future Nostalgia definitely set the perfect tone. I think it would have been awkward if that would have been somewhere in the middle of the track listing.
Right.
But I think it fits perfectly right there. So track number 2 on Future Nostalgia is the one that everybody knows, nominated for a shit ton of Grammys coming up, is Don't Start Now.
Yep. I just remember being so ready for this song to drop, like, it it was hard to even make any notes about it because it's so just, like, ingrained in me now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those songs that's hit that next level of a pop culture perfection.
Right.
Like, it's like I feel like it's ingrained in life now.
For
You know
sure.
what I mean? It's kinda like Taylor Swift "Shake It Off," like, as in, it just is so universally just perfect and
For
adored.
sure.
There's not really too much I even have to say about "Don't Start Now" aside from the
Right, I
fact that
mean,
it's
what like,
perfect.
what I don't know how we could explain that to you guys. I'm sure y'all know it and have your own opinions.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, "I don't like Dua Lipa's 'Don't Start Now.'" Like,
Right.
I don't think that's an opinion anybody has, genuinely. And like we said, it is nominated for Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best Pop Solo Performance at the Grammys coming up. Is that next month when they air, I think?
I think so.
Yeah, so it's definitely
End of next month, beginning of February, maybe.
yeah, I think it's right at the end of January. I don't know, so going into and we don't have to go over every single track because there are so many here, so which ones would you like to kinda dive deep into now? Dive into next?
Alright, so definitely Hallucinate. In my opinion, it should have been a single.
The it still could be, like, she's still riding the because like, she's still pushing right now Levitating. So once Levitating runs its course, and it's I think Levitating because it's still rising, is going to be, like, a number 1 hit. I think it's gonna be huge, like, at the beginning of next year.
Yeah,
I could still see her pushing another single. Like, there's no reason why she can't.
for sure, but I mean, it's my favorite song. It's got that heavy bass line to it, like, it's a super dance song.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it was definitely one of the standouts the first time I listened to the album. It was Hallucinate.
for sure. And then of course Levitating, but after the remixes, when I listen to Levitating alone, it just feels kind of lonely, you know? It feels like I'm missing something.
Yeah, I agree. I love Levitating just by itself, but I think the DaBaby remix adds a lot to it, and I also do really enjoy the Madonna and Missy
I
Elliott
was gonna say
remix.
I prefer the Blessed Madonna remix. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
I mean, in Levitating itself, like you said, it's still very poppy. It's still very catchy. It plays with her vocal range. It's another fun, happy, kind of feel good song.
Yeah,
Um,
and she touches on the rapping that she did in Future Nostalgia in the,
right.
bridge towards the end.
Yeah, and in that Apple Music bit that they shared, she said that it was the first song that she wrote for this album that
Oh,
her
really?
team really got behind and actually kind of started to see her vision for the album.
Wow.
So yeah. Um, I do want to just kind of touch on Good in Bed because I do love that song so much.
Yeah, it's such a like, how you said, like, it does feel so not so out of place,
But it
but
sticks out.
yeah, and I don't really know if that's a bad thing because it might be like if you were just going into this album, you had never heard any of the songs and you were just listening to it through. I think that would be like the number one biggest standout because it's so just different.
Right, like the chorus is playful, but my thing is it's almost not dancey enough. It's almost too traditional. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? To go with the rest of
yeah,
the track list.
yeah, because it's just a
Yeah, there's no like boom boom choo doo 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 choo doo, like
yeah.
nothing, no heavy drops or anything. So
Yeah, and but I do think I don't know. Uh, Good in Bed is such a weird song to really even talk about because, like, in the chorus, like, there's that part where she's gonna say bad, I think, but then it just has that like water droplet sound effect.
yeah,
And but then I love the breakdown where it's like, we're not. Doesn't she go like, we can't talk, but we know how to fuck?
yeah.
I just love it because
Yeah, I mean,
things
it's
that
she said the song is basically about, being in a relationship where that's the only thing that holds you together and how those usually don't end well and
yeah, been there, done that. Currently, right now in my life, this
oh,
I was listening to it and I was like, oh, this kind of is so
messing with
true.
my head. Oh,
I'm just gonna be next time I see the guy
so,
I'm talking about, and just be like, "You're messing with my head. You make me really mad."
but one thing I do really love about the album is it is such a time travel. Like some of these songs I could really see Madonna doing. You could maybe even Whitney or even Michael Jackson. There's one song I noted that I was like, I could definitely like see David Bowie getting ready to sing this and like Andy Warhol standing outside Studio 54. And I'm like, pick me. You don't have to choose me or, do choose me, but you don't have to love me.
Yeah, I
um,
think the most Madonna song on the album is "Love Again"
Love Again is the one I was talking about with David Bowie. Yep.
with David Bowie.
Yes.
I just like the what was I gonna say? You would think I'd have it right on the tip of my tongue. I've listened to this album several times today. How does "Love Again" go? Got me in love again. That's how it goes.
Yeah, you got
Yeah,
me in
I
love again.
I can totally yeah, I could hear David Bowie
Ooh,
on that. I
ooh,
can
ooh.
the one that I can never that does not stick with me ever, and I like I said, I've listened to this several times today, is "Pretty Please." I think that might be the most not the fillery one of the album, but the one that just doesn't strike any chords with me. Like, I can't even remember it right now.
I The only thing I remember are the very first few lines. They show off her bravado really well and then she switches it up to that falsetto really quickly. And
Yeah.
I was like, "Ooh, child," but then other than that, like, it's slower than the rest of them. It's another one that really could have probably been replaced with another song, but I don't know, maybe it had a personal meaning for her. You
Right.
know, they did note, she says it's about the early stages of relationships and, being chill in them and not being too overbearing. And they made the note that whoever she wrote it with actually knew Anwar Hadid, that's who she's with now. And
Okay.
so they were actually like, kind of talking about him and how she wanted their future to be good together and stuff. So, like, I
Ah,
guess maybe that had a soft spot in her heart and that's why it got thrown on there. But
gotcha. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's nice you've done. Sounds like you just know a lot about like the history behind the songs in the album, which I don't really for Future Nostalgia.
It's only because of that Apple, like, update. They do it for like, most of them break down the songs by order, but Taylor's just kind of had, like, a general overview. I was kinda disappointed.
That's weird. Well, Taylor, and we'll get into it when we're talking about folklore here in a minute. She did a really in-depth breakdown for Disney Plus.
Oh,
Uh,
on
yeah,
that,
like
like, that documentary?
yeah, well, yeah, it was like Long Pond documentary or something where she performed all the songs, and her and Aaron Dessner and Jack Antonoff went through every song's backstory.
Cool, cool.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
yeah, I really don't have anything else too
I want to.
much.
I do want to touch on "Boys Will Be Boys."
Yes, because it is a
It
very powerful song.
Yeah, it's one of those songs where I have a lot of respect for it, but I think it's the weakest song on the album.
I like, my literal note was that it should have maybe been a bonus track on an extended edition of this album.
Hmm.
I kind of agree with you. It's not, like, it doesn't have the power the rest of the songs do. It doesn't fit. The feel is completely different. It's acoustic, almost. There's
Yeah, and when you compare it to like the song "Future Nostalgia" or "Hallucinate" or "Levitating" or "Physical," it just sounds so out of place.
it sounds like, I don't even know, like, I don't
Yeah,
know, like Joanne maybe, but we're not on a Joanne album. We're on
right.
your art pop era.
Yeah. And then like so I did worst songs for both of them too. Figuring out my worst songs for folklore was hard because I love them all so much. But Future Nostalgia's worst song kind of jumped right out at me, and I don't know. I know this wasn't on the original album, but she's doing like a re-release of it right now, and she added the Levitating remix with the baby and Fever with
Yeah.
Angel, and I do not like that.
What, you don't like Fever?
I don't. I think it is by far the worst one on this track list.
I love Fever. I
Really?
like that. I think it's probably just because it's the French. I don't know. I really enjoy listening to music from other languages and other cultures, so I really like that they came
Right.
together. Um, it's very dancey. It's very poppy. I don't know. I guess if I had to pick a worst song, I would definitely go with "Boys Will Be Boys" for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Too.
Boys Will Be Boys was my runner up. And if we're just talking the original version, the original 11 track album, it would be the worst.
Yeah, I just, and I mean, like, the message behind it, she apparently had it in mind about, like, catcalling and things that she had to deal with growing up and going home from school off the
Yeah,
bus, and it was like a 3-minute walk home. And so,
right.
like, I get the message, but it still just doesn't fit the album necessarily.
All right, so let's jump into folklore and go over it, and then we can go back and kind of compare the two and stuff.
And things.
So this my story behind folklore, and I think we've touched on this a little bit in our Grammy podcast, maybe even our Get to Know Us podcast. But folklore, Taylor Swift is my favorite artist, and folklore is I think now I can definitively say it's my favorite album by her. And with the extra added cherry on top, it was surprise released on my birthday. So it was almost like it was a present to me.
Yeah, there was only 11 months between it and Lover. They were
Yeah,
like, what do they call that when you have kids that close? Irish twins. They were
yeah,
Irish twin albums, is what they were.
I love it. But and what's so cool about her evolution over the past couple albums since she went full pop, like what's it called? Reputation. Wow. Reputation was so dark and so like hip hoppy and had all those trap beats and it was really hard. And then Lover kind of took some of those sounds but really made it more airy and atmospheric and happy and more bubblegummy. But you had hints of this folklore sound on tracks like The Archer and um, Soon You'll Get Better, that she was on Lover, that you could tell she was kind of trying to get into this more back to her roots a little bit.
Yeah.
So I loved that she just took that and ran with it on Folklore.
Folklore to me is all about the piano. That girl leans on the piano heavy for this album, and I love it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the production was done by Aaron Dessner and Jack Antonoff. So Aaron Dessner is from the band The National, and then
Yeah,
yeah,
I didn't know who that was. They mentioned that on the Apple little
yeah,
intro thing, and
and
that everything was written and recorded remotely during the pandemic.
yeah. She was not planning on making an album at all, and then it just kind of happened.
Well, that's really cool. I mean,
So let's dive into track number 1 called The One.
yeet.
So the one is also just how we said with the song Future Nostalgia. I feel like I need to differentiate when we're talking about the album as a whole and then the actual song so people don't get confused.
Right.
The one opens up Folklore perfectly, and again, it sets the whole tone all the way down to the very first line, I'm doing good, I'm on some new shit. And she's definitely on some new shit.
Right. Like, people are going to remember that. They're going to be like, hey, you remember when Taylor said, I'm doing good? I'm doing good.
And I just thought of something that was in this song. I need to look it up. Remember the song "Me" from Lover?
Yeah.
That like it was a lead single and stuff. There was an Easter egg in the lyrics of "The One" for me, and it was like her transitioning from one era to another. So
Oh,
I need to look that up. Well, I'll find it. We can come back to it.
yeah. But with the
Um,
one, like you said, you could tell that this album was about to tell a story. Like,
yeah,
and it felt like classic Taylor, but also new and like refreshed, you know. It's hard to explain.
yeah. It was. There's something about the one, even though the one in the rest of the album is more downbeat. It's slower. It still it's refreshing. This song.
Right. It brings like this soulful like vibe I didn't know she had, you know, like
Yeah, and it's not even a. It's not a pop song. It's not a country song. It's not a rock song.
right
It's just a Taylor Swift song. Like there's no real like what
place for
was
it.
yeah.
It's okay because her tone is so soothing and you're just like, "Yep, I'm bopping."
Oh, there it is. Okay, so I found the lyric from Me that is in here. So in the chorus of the one, she says, In my defense, I have none for never leaving well enough alone." And in Me, she says, "I know that I went psycho on the phone. I never leave well enough alone."
Right.
So it's just that bringing back her old lyrics to bring in this one, and then Me was the first song you heard off of Lover, and then this is the first one because this was a surprise album. So the one was the first song most people heard from Folklore, and it's just that whole it's just transition. She's a genius.
Right. See, Cardigan, the second track kind of does that to me. It feels so much like style, dude. It's just
Yeah.
to me it is style just made over, a little more insightful, a little few better metaphors here and there, slight alt pop twist.
Yes. Oh,
The only
are you ready to get into Cardigan? I have
Sure.
so much to say. Okay, so track 2 of Folklore is Cardigan. Cardigan obviously was the lead single, and only really the only real single from the album, because she wasn't really planning on releasing big singles. This wasn't a singles album, it's just an experience by itself. Unlike Future Nostalgia, which is the whole track list is great, but it was very single driven.
Yes.
Um, but so Cardigan, and so Cardigan, the song August, which is track number 8, and Betty, which is track number 14, they all three go together. Do you know this story?
No.
So, so Cardigan, August, and Betty are from three different people's perspectives on it's in a teenage love triangle.
Right, because I was wondering, Betty had me like, is Taylor Betty?
No, so okay, so it's kind of confusing, and it took me a while to really figure it out, and then she confirmed it in her Disney Plus documentary. Cardigan is from the perspective of Betty, the person Betty, not the song.
Okay.
Um, and then the song August is from the perspective of this girl named Augustine. And then the song Betty is from the perspective of James. And it's a love triangle between Betty, James, and Augustine.
So which one is Taylor Augustine?
She's not any of them. She's just
She didn't confirm or deny.
right. She just came up with these characters in the storyline and then put them into three different songs.
Okay. Well, I do love August. It's one of my favorites off the album.
When Betty first came out, I have a lot. I have so many thoughts. I need to organize them in my head with this love triangle. When Betty first came out, people thought uh, Taylor had this crush on this woman, and it was like her like coming out as either like
What?
bisexual or gay or something. Yeah, because uh, it sounds like it does from like, right on the surface sounds like a love song to this girl named Betty.
Well, yeah, but if you listen, you can totally tell it's from a dude's perspective.
Exactly. And so I remember I was like, what is this song about? Like, because the first time you listen to it and
Because
you
at
don't
first, like I
think about it.
genuinely thought maybe Taylor was apologizing for treating her friend that way. Like I literally was like, is she a bully or is she Betty? You know?
Yeah. And so what's cool about Cardigan is that it is uh from Betty's perspective about 30 years after James cheated on her with Augustine in high school.
Wow.
And in Taylor Swift's mind, she says that Betty and James ended up together, like they got married, they had a whole life together, and then James dies. Old age, he dies. They were married for like 30 years,
Oh.
whatever. And then the cardigan is something that James got her when she was younger, and she found it in a box under her bed and put it on, and it like comforted her.
Well, I really like the story. I
Yeah,
Cardigan on its own though, like to me just the tempo and the timing of her verses is a little bit off.
really, I think that's what makes it so special.
I don't like the way that the music and her verses go together.
That's fair.
But I mean that's just my personal opinion. I like the song. The hook is catchy, like I said, but it just there's something about the timing of the verses that I just can't I don't get with.
Yeah, she has a very different cadence to her voice than she has used before.
Right. And I mean maybe that's what it is. I'm just not used to it or things of that nature, but to me they just don't mesh.
Also, can I just say the lyric Peter losing Wendy in the last chorus breaks my heart.
Yes.
Because I loved Peter Pan when I was a kid. And so that for of all things to really resonate with me when I was listening to this album for the first time through, that is one of the lyrics that really got me.
For the longest time it was just like me and my husband and his friends. I it's not that I don't hang out with females, but they're a little harder to hang out with. So I used to call myself Wendy to the Lost Boys because I was surrounded by a bunch of like young men who knew nothing of what to do with their life.
Right.
So we went to London and I actually saw the Peter Pan statue that's in Hyde Park over there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was great. And there's like a little tree right around the corner from it, and it has all these little parakeets, and you can just walk up to it and they'll land on you. I thought that was kind of like a nice touch.
Yeah, that is really cool. Let's move into The Last Great American Dynasty.
Yes.
You said you have a lot to say about it. I have a lot to say about it. It's my favorite song on this whole album. It's one of my all-time favorite Taylor Swift songs. So let's dive into The Last Great American Dynasty.
Okay. Do you want to go first?
I can. I uh, so a little background on The Last Great American Dynasty. For those of you who haven't listened to these albums or um, specifically The Last Great American Dynasty, it's a history lesson, more or less. So
Yeah.
Taylor Swift lives in the house that was formerly owned by Bill and Rebecca Harkness, who were pretty popular, pretty famous back in the day. Bill Harkness he did something with oil, I don't know, but so he was pretty wealthy. But Rebecca Harkness, and women always end up getting just they're held to a higher standard than men. It's terrible. It's like one of the worst parts about our society. Um,
Yeah.
she had been divorced and remarried Bill, and so people were just saying she's a gold digger. She just wants his money, whatever. So they were married for Bill and Rebecca. They were married for I don't even know, not long, 5 or 6 years, and then Bill died. He had, I believe, a heart attack and died.
Wow.
And yeah, so then people blamed her for his death because like they threw big parties and I mean they were wealthy, so they lived a wealthy life. They did a lot of stuff and it was too much on him. So when he died, they just blamed her. So that is kind of the saga, the tragedy of Rebecca Harkness in her life and how people in the media treated her. So I so in this song, what is so cool is the celebrity Taylor Swift, and we kind of touched on it in our last podcast, where a lot of times when you listen to Taylor's music, you have to be able to separate Taylor Swift, the artist, from Taylor Swift, the celebrity, because there's so much. There's just so much there.
Yep.
She's such a divisive presence for most people. She's such a divider. Like everyone has an opinion on Taylor Swift. And so I love that The Last Great American Dynasty sets itself up as this history lesson about Rebecca Harkness. And then by the end of the song, in the last verse and chorus, you realize the whole setup and the whole story is a metaphor for the celebrity Taylor Swift, who people just call loud and obnoxious and does all these crazy things just to get a rise out of people. And it's one of the best narrative flips I've ever heard in a song.
I'll be honest, I had no idea about Rebecca Harkness or any of that, but I literally wrote down white picket fence story with a new edge twist. And then right behind that, does that make sense? Because I don't even know. But like when I listen to this song, like you just said, like this song is Taylor. Like you
Yeah.
can listen to it and you can see her with her bob and her red lipstick and like walking the green dog that she stole and died, you know? Like,
I'll bet, I was literally just about to say that. Another one of my favorite lines in the whole album is she stole his dog and died at Key Lime Green.
dude,
I really hope that's true.
I laughed so hard. I was like, yes.
Like if that is true, if that's a real event that happened, and I'm sure it is, like I'm sure that's not something Taylor would just think of to write in a song. Um, that makes me love Rebecca Harkness so much. If she literally stole someone's dog and dyed it green because she was pissed off.
Right. One thing I did, it's old school country too, but it almost feels like it could be an XX song. You know,
Yeah.
I, to me it does. Like I could easily see them kind of slowing it down just a little bit and maybe leaving the dog part out. I don't know. But it does. It feels like they would almost do this song. A lot of these songs kind of remind me of the XX.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I know the XX. I'm not super familiar with their sound, so I don't know, but that's pretty interesting. Maybe
Yeah.
apparently I'd really like the XX.
You I feel like you probably would. They're a little dancey, but they're kind of like they're really alt pop is where they fall,
Yeah.
and I really just know them because they're really good friends with Florence Welch, and they did this cover of "You've Got the Love," and yeah, long story, but anyways.
It's interesting that you said it's kind of a country song because even though it doesn't sound sonically like a country song, its songwriting is very country.
It
And in
is.
the Disney Plus documentary, Taylor Swift says that she wrote this. It's a country song, just not with a country rhythm.
Right, my like I have in my notes, country meets pop with some synthy vibes thrown
Yeah,
in.
pretty much. And that's a lot of this album, to be honest.
Yeah. So, do we want to move on to number 4?
We can. And then after we get through Exile, we can start jumping around to the other ones.
All right.
I'll let you start on this one.
Literally his voice, her voice, the voices, the voices.
The
I mean,
voices are so good.
like it's just music to your ears. Oh.
He has uh so I wrote a thing on my a blog post on my website today, going over my top 20 favorite songs of the year. Spoiler alert, there's several Taylor Swift songs in it.
Oh, I figured.
I tried to limit myself, so I only had 4 in the top 20. So
But
I felt
top
like I
20 is
did
going to be
pretty good.
hard for me anyways. I feel like
Yeah,
ours are going to be very different though.
that's good though. But so I literally said in my little spiel about Exile that was in my top 20 that Justin Vernon of Bon Iver, the lead vocalist, his voice is so hauntingly beautiful, and it just him and Taylor's chemistry somehow, with them being, I'm sure, hundreds if not like thousands of
Right.
miles apart, somehow they had this chemistry that
That
it's a perfect duet.
that middle bit of the song where they're exchanging lyrics, like almost back and forth, it
Hmm.
reminds me of "I Know What You Did Last Summer" with Camila and Sean, and
Oh,
I eat it
that,
up.
that's a good comparison, and that's actually a very good comparison because that's another gr- perfect duet in my opinion.
Right, and that was before they were even a couple.
Oh yeah, that was when they were still like doing the
Babies.
whole teenager baby thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but for Exile, like literally, I these two could sell more records than the Civil Wars and the XX combined if they did an album. Like
Oh, I
it
would
would
kill
be.
for bone a Bon Iver Taylor Swift album.
I mean,
Man,
it would sell for sure.
if Exile doesn't win the Grammy for Best Pop Duo Group Performance, I
Um,
will be very upset.
I mean, there's no way it's not going to win. It's literally perfect.
Yeah,
So
the only other song that might come at it is Rain on Me.
yeah, but
I wouldn't be mad at, but this is the definition of perfect.
I told you that I had a lot of Emily Kinney on here, right?
Yeah.
Invisible String reminds me so much of Emily Kinney. Like it's got this very Berkeley's breathing feel. I don't know. I don't know
I
why, but it does.
So for our listeners who might not really know who Emily Kinney is, Emily Kinney played Beth Green on AMC's The Walking Dead, which is my favorite show. And Chelsea and I actually did a project on Emily Kinney for school a little while ago because Beth, the character, her whole thing was uh, even when it was dark and depressing, she still had music. She was still a singer. She was still a musician. So she was always singing and stuff during the show. And in real life, she's an actual musician. That's actually her number one thing over acting. And so, uh, and she does kind of a similar sound. She does really have a very similar style to Folklore. Obviously, it's not as refined because she's not a big A-list star like Taylor Swift is, but that is actually a very good comparison. That Invisible String is very much an Emily Kinney-esque song.
And I also feel like Invisible String, it would have fit right in on the first album. It would have been Invisible String, and then you should have said no right behind it. Like, bam, boom, haha.
I, I love the whole concept of Invisible String because like the whole idea of your soulmate is out there, and what if this whole time there's an invisible string connecting you two and you just haven't been able to follow it yet.
I mean, they say that is like a real thing. Like, it's a thing. Like, that people
So
believe in. I don't necessarily, but
and if you're listening, future husband, please find the invisible string and
yep.
connect us because I'm ready.
But Betty is another song that also had a very Emily Kinney feel to it. She writes a lot of songs. A lot of her song titles are names. She writes about like people. I don't know if Emily knows these people personally. I like to think that she does, but like Molly and Michael and Julie, even.
Yeah.
So as soon as
Oh,
I saw
Julie.
Betty, I was like,
Take home, Julie. I love that
yes, I
song.
love Julie so much. Like, that's really honestly what made me fall in love with her music. Because, yes,
What
Take Home Julie.
what do you think we need to do to get a Taylor Swift Emily Kinney collaboration?
Oh, dude, we'd have to petition real hard. I'm sure the hardest part would be getting Taylor's attention. I don't think it would be that hard to get Emmy to agree.
Yeah, 'cause she's a big star, but she's nowhere on the level of Taylor Swift, nor are like pretty much anybody else
Right.
when it comes to fame. But yeah, I could totally. That's one comparison I'm surprised I never thought of for Emily Kinney being my favorite actress and one of my favorite musicians. I'm surprised I never made that connection to how similar her style is to this
Well,
album.
it's only really certain songs because Emily's very, very like bright. You know what I'm saying? and this album, it has darker moments, and so it's really only certain songs that I really get that Emily Kinney feel, but it's definitely there, and I'm like, hey, okay. Mad Woman, like Taylor came out and her voice was so strong. Like, I literally thought she was Gaga for a minute when I heard it the first time, and I knew I was listening to Taylor Swift, but
Yeah,
like on that one, her voice was just strong.
yeah, the Mad Woman is the boys will be boys of folklore, as in
Right.
just by concept, not really sonically, just concept.
They're very different sonically.
Mhm. And in the last Great American Dynasty, Taylor, there's so many. If you really listen to this album, she's always calling back to other songs, and on the track listing, she references like movies a lot. There's a lot of different references to um, like movies and film reels and stuff like that. And in the last Great American Dynasty, she says she calls Rebecca Harkness a mad woman. And then later in the track listing, there's a song called Mad Woman. So I just thought that was a cool connection.
Right. Another one, Mirror Ball felt very 90s to me. Like, it could almost be like Sixpence None the Richer. Do you know
Yeah,
who that is?
I don't,
Uh they uh
I might if I heard it.
they just I don't really know any song by them, but they do that Kiss Me Beneath the Milky Twilight, Leave
Oh,
Me.
I think I know. Yeah, that
Yeah,
sounds
it's in a
familiar.
lot of movies and stuff, but
Yeah, okay.
and then there's a Natalie, I can't remember her last name, but she sings Torn and it's very up that alley too, but
Natalie Imbruglia.
yeah, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah,
That one.
I'm already torn. Yeah,
Yes, Mirrorball feels like that to me. Like, it feels like
yeah,
that kind of category. And then
yeah.
My Tears
I love
Ricochet
Mirrorball.
kind of has a little Billy to it to me, a little Billie Eilish thrown in there.
Yeah, My Tears Ricochet was the first song Taylor wrote for this album,
I really like it. It's my
and
second favorite song of the album.
yeah, what would you say your favorite is? This Is Me Trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, This Is Me Trying is a song that I've only really come around to. Like I've always liked it, but I never really was going back to it. But I find myself going back to it a lot lately.
Well, I don't know. I'm a Gemini. I don't know if you know much about Geminis or not, but like, I
I
tend to
don't.
have a pretty quick fuse, and so like I've been really trying to work on like not being angry all the time. So like This Is Me Trying is just kind of really relatable to me
Oh,
personally.
perfect.
So
Um,
also My Tears Ricochet, it just kind of hit a little home, and
yeah.
it really did feel like Billie Eilish, and I was like, okay, Taylor.
Taylor's track fives off every single album of hers. Everyone knows track five is always going to be the heartbreaking song. That's where
Oh, really?
All Too Well is a track five. Delicate is track five. The Archer is track five.
Oh, I've never paid attention.
Yeah. She talks about that in that Disney Plus documentary too. She's like, I always have to make sure my track five is the saddest one in the whole album.
Right.
But, so I want to talk about right before we go back and kind of start talking about both Future Nostalgia and Folklore, the song Hoax, which is the closer on the regular album. The deluxe version has the Lakes as the bonus track, but just for the regular album, uh, there is a line in Hoax that the first time I heard it, and still when I hear it, I just cry. So I had, and we're gonna get kind of deep into my psyche and my life for a minute. Um, I had kind of like I broke up with friends. Like I had a
Friend
best.
breakups are the
Yeah,
worst.
it's worse than a romantic breakup. I swear. Um, my best friend for like my whole life. We were living together. Like we were basically learning how to be adults together. Like we were two peas of the same pod. Like we were inseparable. Like best friends. Like more like family. You know what I mean?
Right, I know.
And we had a huge fight over uh that doesn't matter what we were fighting over, but we had a huge fight, and I ended up having to move out and move down south with my family, back in with my parents. It was horrible, and that was a year and a half ago, and we still have not spoken.
I'm so sorry.
It was horrible. That was one of the worst times in my entire life. And we lived where we lived. I grew up in northern Pennsylvania, right on the border of Pennsylvania and New York. So when her and I were living together, we were actually right on the other side of the border in New York State. And so there is a line in Hoax said, I left a part of me. I should have looked up the exact lyrics, but it was basically, I left a piece of me back in New York.
Yeah,
I'm
I
putting it up right.
remember that line.
Oh, there it is. You know, you left a part of me back in New York. You knew the hero died, so what's the movie for? You know, it still hurts underneath my scars from when they pulled me apart. You knew the password, so I let you in the door. You knew I won, so what's the point of keeping score? Keeping score. And man, every time I hear those lyrics and I hear Hoax, my whole life just like
Right,
she
it's like,
shattered my world.
oh.
It's so real. And I think Hoax, the way I take it, is like a friend breakup, and it was so much for me when I first heard it. I haven't cried that much listening to music in a very, very, very long time, if ever.
But I mean, and friend breakups aren't talked about like they should be. They aren't addressed like they should be. It is really tough to lose because a lot of times, especially when you're best friends with somebody, like you said, you're two peas in a pod, like you can finish each other's sentences and it's like losing a piece of yourself, you know? It's a different type of soulmate. It's not a I love you soulmate, but it's an I love you soulmate, but not a like a I lust for you soulmate. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. The Hoax might be I might be one of the only people that genuinely adore that song.
I was gonna say it's not a personal favorite of mine. Like it didn't really stand out. I did notice that we brought it back around to the piano because a lot of the tracks before that were pretty guitar centric.
Yeah.
I could totally see like Julia Michaels singing this song though. Like
Mm. I would
I,
love for a Taylor Swift, Julia Michaels. Let's get Taylor, Julia, Billy, and Emily Kinney all on a song together.
everybody. But I
That'd be
mean,
the most heartbreaking song ever, I'm sure.
and it's not like I was listening to the album really like trying to make comparisons or anything, but I really could just like I could hear styles of people in the songs and I'm like, man, Taylor's really versatile. You know, this is a lot of different genres and writing abilities and all kinds of different things.
Yeah. So,
Are we going to do least favorite for this album?
that's what I was just about to say. So, let's go our least favorite, and I also do have a runner up, but my runner up is not even. I don't even dislike that song very much. So my worst, I'll let you go first because I'm curious.
I think the song that I liked the least was Epiphany.
That is also mine.
And that song sounds very much like Florence Welch. I should love that song. It's got the little chorus in the opening, they're like, oh, la, la, la. But those first few lines about the helmet and keeping your life, those really hit home for me. I lost a friend in a motorcycle accident.
Mm,
And
sorry.
yeah, I mean, it's been 7 years now, but it still is something that hits pretty close to home. So
For sure, yeah.
when I'm listening to things the first time through, I usually read the lyrics as well. And like I tried to listen to the song, but I couldn't. I listened to it about halfway through and I was like, okay, I'm sorry, Taylor. I tried. But first off, you sound like my queen and you're not her. And this is reminding me of Blake, so I'm gonna pass.
Yeah.
But
Um,
my second least favorite would probably be Seven.
really?
Yes.
Seven is it's never I don't really go back to it, but I do like that song.
And the only reason I don't like it, I feel like it just gets lost in the placement because by that point, all the songs have begun to sound the same.
That's fair. I think yeah, when you get to everything between Seven and Epiphany kind of at one point kind of just melded together for me.
Right.
After many listens now, I have found my love for each of those songs, and they don't get lost in translation, but I think at first they definitely do. My runner up for worst was Mad Woman.
Mad Woman. See, I just loved that so much because I did not expect Taylor to just be so, like, she's never, her voice, how do I say this? She's never really brought like a big, strong bravado like she did then. It's always been a little bit airier
Yeah.
because she doesn't really have like a raspy quality, but almost on this album she does. But
My
that
thing,
song
yeah.
particularly, she was just like belting, like, hey.
My biggest gripe with Mad Woman has nothing to do with the sound. I think it sounds fine. I just she did on her album Lover, she had the song The Man. And
Yeah.
so I felt like we didn't need this song here too cuz
So
and
to
it just
you, this one was like me for the one that's like Style remade. Oh yeah, Cardigan.
yeah, and this whole album, it's not really about her. It's about like she takes on different personas, and like obviously she had like the love triangle, and then she's Rebecca Hart. She's talking about Rebecca Harkness, so she has all these different things, and I feel like Mad Woman just kind of took me back to Reputation and Lover, where she was referencing her celebrity so much, and I it kind of took me out of the whole experience of the album. By itself, it's not a bad song at all. It just I think in the album as a whole, it does not fit.
I could see. I mean, I get where you're saying. I get where you're coming from.
Before we wrap this up, as we approach our 1 hour mark, I want to go over kind of why we think these two albums resonated so much with the public as a whole. And then kind of, I went through and I looked at where they were ranking among critics and stuff for like different year end charts that are all coming out right now. And so I kind of want to go over those too.
Okay.
So, why do you think people connected so much with folklore and with future nostalgia, especially with them being they're so different. They're not even in the same ballpark as albums. They have 100% different styles, different sounds. So, but they're like everybody's two favorite albums of the year. So, why do you think that is?
Okay. So I guess we'll just start with Folklore. Everything on Folklore, even though it isn't written from Taylor's perspective and she's telling stories and whatnot, it's all very relatable. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And it came out during a time where people really just needed something relatable, something new that they could listen to kind of keep their mind occupied.
Yeah,
Um, and I don't know. Plus the fact that it was a surprise release carries a lot of weight with Taylor. Because
yeah,
she doesn't do that, right? Like that's not a
exactly.
thing for her, like at all.
her releases are always so planned out, and there's so much thought that goes into her releases, and there's so much work that goes into her releases. So just doing a surprise album drop, especially one like this that no one would have expected her to sound like next.
I think that her the alternative really played to her advantage because that's what people are kind of moving towards nowadays. Like pop isn't just pop anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And
When you have people like Harry Styles and Juice World and Post Malone and Halsey, who Machine Gun Kelly, Black Bear, they're really helping to blur the lines of pop and rock and bring rock back into the mainstream.
for sure, for sure. And I feel
Miley
like
Cyrus.
oh, yep, shout out. I feel I feel like people are also just kind of tired of listening to the same type of music and you know, they were
Yeah,
excited to see something new. So,
yeah, because this album definitely, from like a marketing standpoint, would not be the smartest move, because it's not, there's not a big lead single, there's not these big pop hooks, there's
right,
not
it's like basically relying on word of mouth and she's not at the point
exactly.
where she has to I mean, she can rely on word of mouth technique obviously, but she doesn't have to. She has many, many, many other resources available.
Yeah. And Taylor, she could literally release any kind of album, and just because of who she is and how popular she is and how successful she is, people are going to listen, and it's going to be a success. So I think
Right.
it would take a lot for her to have a flop, but if she was going to have a flop album, this would have been it. And it
Exactly.
wasn't.
And it outperformed some of her other albums.
Yeah.
So,
What about Future Nostalgia?
future nostalgia for me. Okay, so I don't know if you know much about like music trends,
Mhm.
but generally like, when people are happier, I know it's weird, but people will make sadder songs. But when you're sad, people tend to make happier songs like when the environment's sadder, politically, socially, economically.
Right, and no one was sadder than how the words going. Everyone was sad in 2020. It's
Oh,
just
for
been
sure.
a
There's
year.
been nothing more disappointing than 2020. So I just feel like Dua's release, I already felt like the world was prepared for her second album. We were anticipating it. Everybody was looking forward to it. But I feel like the fact that it was so poppy and so happy and just catchy and released in a time when we all needed a little bit of light,
Right.
I feel like that's why it has done so well.
And there's always so much pressure because this is Dua's sophomore album. It's her second album. There's always so much pressure on the second album because, yes, uh, her first album, which was just called Dua Lipa, correct? It
Yes,
was
it was
self-titled,
self-titled.
yeah. That was such a big success. Like she won 2 Grammys. She won
Right.
the Best New Artist at the Grammys.
For sure.
So
Everybody was anticipating this.
yes, so everyone, the second album, people are always like, it's either gonna be a huge success or it's gonna be the sophomore slump, and
Right.
you'll just fade out of nowhere. That happens to so many up and coming
Right. Like I
artists. Their
said, we
second
didn't
album
know,
just,
would
yeah,
she be Daya or would she be Britney Spears? So
yeah,
it's looking like we're leaning towards Britney Spears, hopefully. And it's funny that you brought up the second album because that is like one of the first things they mentioned in her Apple review.
hmm
Was that, a lot of people are scared to make a second album because there's so much pressure. But she said, I wasn't scared. I just was ready to go make a fun dance album. I knew what I wanted to do and I had my vision for it. And we were going to time travel. And that's exactly what we did. And I don't think she could have delivered anything better.
yeah, I completely agree. So I was looking up like different the where the both these albums placed on the Billboard 200 albums chart when they were released. So Folklore was number one for non-consecutive 8 weeks. So in total, it was number
Yes.
one on the uh, Billboard 200 for 8 weeks. Future Nostalgia really surprised me. Only peaked at number 4.
Wow. So it
Yeah,
didn't even hit number one.
no. And then I was looking on the year-end chart that Billboard just released. like a couple of days ago. Folklore is the fifth biggest album of the year, which surprised me. I thought it'd be higher. But guess where Future Nostalgia was? And it really, really blew me away.
I hope
Number
not out of the top 10.
It was number 62.
Shut up.
Yeah, and I don't know how that's even possible, but I guess uh how we said earlier, Folklore did not have those big singles. It just relied on the track list as a whole, and people were just seeking out the whole album. But Future Nostalgia is very much a singles album, like Don't Start Now and Break My Heart and Levitating. A lot of people know Physical and Hallucinate too.
Yep.
Um, so I think even though Folklore was the more popular album as a whole, Future Nostalgia had the more popular songs. So she had a lot more radio play. So it felt like it was bigger than I guess it was.
It was big to me either way.
Yeah. But when you look, and when aside from like just looking at its performance and the numbers and stuff that Billboard ranks, but just by looking at like critic lists,
Yeah.
their Folklore and Future Nostalgia are almost always both in the top 10. Most of the times, uh, I looked at like 4 or 5 different charts, and several of them had Folklore at number 1 and Future Nostalgia at number 2. So everybody agrees that these two albums were the best of the year.
They were. I mean, they were. No ifs, ands, or buts.
So, and even though I think obviously Folklore probably won't have another single, probably won't have another music video, Future Nostalgia is still going. Like we talked about earlier, Don't Start Now was so popular and it lasted for forever. You couldn't get away from it on the radio. And then the same thing happened with Break My Heart. Could not escape it. Such a huge song. And now the same thing is starting to happen with Levitating. And so who knows, like how we talked about earlier, Hallucinate or Physical could get that uh,
Right.
mainstream music video radio release that it
You never
deserves.
know. They could catch a TikTok challenge and then boom.
Yeah, yeah, it just takes that much. But yeah, so what else is there to say? These two albums, I'm surprised we even had so much to talk about because these two albums are just so perfect in my opinion.
They really are. And I mean, that's what I don't know. I really didn't have much to say bad about either one of them.
Me either.
I mean, Taylor's album, I didn't realize because, like I said, you know that I don't know. I listen to her music, but I'm not the biggest fan.
Right.
So, like, I didn't realize it's been a long time since I listened to the album all the way through, and how long the track list was. I was just like, man.
Yeah.
So I did at points get lost, and I talked about how I don't necessarily care for the last two tracks being on Future Nostalgia, but other than that, I loved both albums. They're great to just sit through and listen to anytime. 10 out of 10
Yeah.
recommend.
Exactly. And I'm so happy that the two uh best albums of the year are so different. Like I'm so happy like we had so much different things to say about both of them because
Right.
there's not really one similarity between the two except the Boys Will Be Boys and Mad Woman being basically the same kind of message.
Right. Other than that, they are completely different.
They are they are both competing against each other at the Grammys for Album of the Year and for Best Pop Vocal Album. They are up against some pretty stiff competition with Post Malone, Haim, Janae Aiko, Coldplay, but I don't see how one of these two don't win. And I really think it's a toss up. It just depends on which one the voters think was more impactful this year, I guess.
Yeah. We shall see.
And as we said before, Taylor and Dua are going to sweep the Grammys. They every single one of the categories that they're nominated in, I think one of the two will win.
Definitely, I agree.
Especially with the Weekend out of the mix.
There's no competition
No.
except
Like
for them. They're competing against each other.
the The only thing I could see happening is maybe them going with Post Malone for something.
Yes,
And
but I would not be mad about that.
no, because he hasn't won a Grammy yet, and these two both have. So
Right. Y'all can wait.
maybe do throw Posty a bone. But that would have been fun if we had even more time to also do Hollywood's Bleeding in this discussion. But that would have been a whole other beast because it's also so different from these two.
Right.
But I think that's good. This has ended up being our longest discussion yet.
Hey.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to this episode of Jukebox Junkies. Next week, Chelsea and I will be going over our 10 favorite and our 10 least favorite songs of the year. So it could be a heated debate because who knows what's going to happen. So if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the channel, like us on Facebook, and hit that notification bell so you know every time we upload a video. And any parting notes, Chelsea?
Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Also, if you guys want to make your own lists, you can share them with us.
Yeah, and if we get some sent to us, maybe we can talk about you guys' lists as well. Like that'd be fun.
Definitely. We could share y'all's opinion and ours.
Exactly. So if you have lists or you want to just tell us maybe like your two favorite and your two least favorite, like it doesn't have to be a whole list. But yeah, anything you guys want to say, anything you want to do, we're more than happy to talk with you and bring you up, maybe give you a shout out in the podcast. Just anything, let us know.
All right.
All right. Until next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.